Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to MRCC's The Meat of the Matter, looking at our recent executive order. My name is Dina Vanderzalm. I will be taking questions if you have them and asking them to our experts here. I also want to thank Jamie Blair, who is our wizard behind the scenes, making all of this possible. I will kick it to our experts here in just a second to introduce themselves. But just in case you do have questions, feel free to put those in the comments section, and we will get to as many as possible. You are probably aware, but on July 9th, President Biden issued a very dense and sweeping executive order, and we wanted to focus in on the competition in agriculture portion because we've gotten a lot of questions from folks about what it is, what it means, and we thought this would be a great way to kind of bring together some great minds and answer a bunch of those questions. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Tim to introduce himself.
Thank you, Dina, and thank you, Jamie, behind the scenes. My name is Tim Gibbons. I'm with the Missouri Rural Crisis Center. MRCC is a statewide farm and rural organization here in Missouri. Obviously, we started in 1985. We started out of the farm crisis of the 80s, sort of ad hoc. We're a membership organization, so our members are generally family farmers and rural people. We do have a wide breadth of members that include consumers as well, and people across our state and across our country. And I appreciate everybody that is here to listen to this hopefully riveting explanation of what President Biden's executive order that he issued on January 9th about competition. It focuses on lots of things within consolidated industries. We're going to focus on agriculture, but without further ado, I'm going to introduce Patty Lovera. Patty is formerly from Food and Water Watch. She is now with Campaign for Family Farms and the Environment. CFFE is a collaboration of statewide farm and rural organizations in the Midwest. And then we have a couple national organizations that work with us as well. And Patty's been working with us to make our voices, the family farm voice, heard, both across our country, but specifically within Washington, D.C. and the Beltway. Patty, if you want to say hello and say what you got to say.
Sure. Hi, everybody. So I am happy to be here. I'm in Washington, D.C. in my little home office down the road from the Capitol and the White House where they're doing all this stuff. And so I'm going to talk for a minute just about what's in the executive order, kind of the scope of it, and then get us a little more detailed about what's in there for agriculture. So when I first met Missouri Rural Crisis Center and there are members and folks in the Midwest who really are in the trenches of what's changed in agriculture. We heard about factory farms and their, pressure on the environment. They're not good for rural communities, like all of the things that are different in a system that's based on big confinement operations. But what I think is most telling when people learn about this problem is that we don't have those operations because they're efficient. We don't have those operations because they make economic sense. We have those operations because they have scaled up to meet the giant scale of a few big meat packers who are really running the middle of the supply chain that connects, the farm side and the consumer side. And as we've seen, consolidation in that middle section of our food supply chain, we've seen lots of other changes that we don't like. So that's why it's such a big deal to get a document like this from the White House that says, we need more competition in the economy, and we don't have it because of consolidation. And that's kind of the bottom line of this executive order. And that is a big deal. That's been a long time coming. And we got it because of groups like MRCC and family farm advocates saying, no, this system doesn't need tweaks. This system is broken and it's controlled by a tiny number of players. So the executive order is not just about agriculture. We're going to spend the most time on that. But just for 1 minute, this is kind of like what's in here. And if you go look at it, there's a fact sheet version, and then there's the full thing you could read if you want to. You're going to see lots of references to, a whole of government approach, looking at the whole economy. But there's a couple of big themes, and the biggest theme is that there's more that federal government agencies can do to make sure that different sectors of the economy are operating fairly for workers, for businesses, and these small businesses, entrepreneurs, and farmers are particularly named as a group of people who the economy is not currently working for. So, but because it's the whole of government, it's the whole economy, they've found different pieces they think they can do without Congress getting involved. And we all know that's probably a faster way to get something done right now. So that's part of why the list looks like it looks, because it's things that federal agencies can do. And I'm not going to list them all, but it's a really interesting list, and it impacts us as folks involved in agriculture, and it impacts us as folks who just participate in this economy. So there's stuff in there about if we had more competition in labor markets, would workers be more mobile to change a job? So there's specific things in there about you need to look at agreements that some workers in some industries have to sign that they can't go to a competitor, like a non-compete agreement. That reduces people's mobility, that reduces their options to go find a better job. There's things in there about, can we look at government should look at bank mergers. They should look at patents, right, which reduce innovation. And they call out patents a couple of places, including, and really importantly, in the issue of pharmaceuticals and drug prices. And why don't we have generic drugs? Often it's because of patent abuse, right? They're not letting a competitor do a generic version. There's stuff in there about how do we get more information and more transparency about internet providers and their pricing, talking about the government should make hearing aids, right, which a huge growing portion of the population needs. Can we make them over the counter? So there's more competition and more providers and they get cheaper. Airline fees on things like baggage. What practices do railroads use? I mean, if there's a longer list than this, I'm going to stop there because I don't want to take our whole time reading the list. But they were exhaustive in saying across the government, all the departments, they can do something so that some sector of the economy has more competition and that there will be benefits from that competition. So for agriculture, many of the things that are in the executive order are plans. They're plans they want to do. And usually it's the U.S. Department of Agriculture who has to do that plan. And that's where we all come in. That's where MRCC members come in to make them do it. So there's a couple of reports they're going to have to write. One that's really interesting is that the USDA is going to have to write a report about the role of patents and agricultural inputs like seeds, right? We all know we don't have enough seed choices for farmers to grow what they want to grow at a good price in a changing climate. It'd be better to have more varieties, not less, right? We know that that's really limited because of the role of intellectual property or patents in the seed system. So that's one report they're going to write. They're going to write a report along with a different division of the government called the Federal Trade Commission about the role that really consolidated grocery retail markets. So we have, just like we have a couple big meat packers that run things, we have a couple big grocery stores that run a lot too. And that consolidation pushes back up the supply chain, and we see ripple effects, and we see processors get bigger to deal with the bigger retailers. And then those processors want to deal with bigger farms, right? So looking at retail is important, and that's a report they're going to do. There's some language in there about having a different part of the government, the Federal Trade Commission, look at the right to repair, right? Which is making it easier, getting rid of these restrictive agreements that you can't work on your own equipment because there's some digital piece in the terms of service saying you can't work on it. There's some stuff in there that's for the whole government, but would be very important to ag about redoing the guidelines that different agencies use when they approve a merger. We've had tremendous amounts of mergers over the last 20, 30 years in agriculture that have not been good for family farms. And so we need to stop new ones. And ideally, if they set the guidelines right, maybe they would look back and unroll some. And then there's a couple things, and Tim will talk more about them, kind of the opening this creates for us. There's some really specific things that USDA has announced they're going to do, we hope, very quickly. One is to look at country of origin labeling. It's not the whole thing we want, but it's a good first step. So we have a problem. We don't require country of origin labeling on meat. We want to talk about that. But you could voluntarily do it right now. A company could voluntarily put the country of origin labeling on meat, but there's a big old loophole in those rules, and it lets product that is processed here be labeled as product of the US, but the animal doesn't have to be born, raised, and slaughtered here. So that loophole needs to be closed, and USDA has said we're going to start a process and we're going to close that loophole. So that's good. It's not everything, but it's good. So we're going to make them finish that part and then keep going. And then they're going to write some rules for folks who've been around for a while, been hearing about the GIPSA rules for a long time. Well, the important part of that crazy acronym is Packers and Stockyards Administration. It's Packers and Stockyards Act, which is an old law It gives farmers and livestock producers rights in the transaction that they have with meat companies that buy their animals, and we've never enforced it very well. And so there's a couple real specific but important things that USDA says they're going to start working on this fall to write rules so we use that law better to protect the rights of farmers and contract growers who are dealing with big meat and poultry companies. And right now, we're in a moment where USDA has money to spend. Congress gave them money to respond to the pandemic. They have $500 million that they want to spend on local meat plants. How do we have more capacity for small and small scale, local scale meat plants? Because we saw last year that we didn't have enough capacity when things got crazy. So there's a comment period right now that's very much in this whole portfolio of competition. And we can all be putting input into that and saying, no, you should do this with that money. You should put strings on it so it doesn't end up benefiting the biggest players who are already dominating the field. So all of that is happening right now. And all of that is what we can be getting out there and telling USDA, telling members of Congress, we want them to not just say they're going to do these things, they actually do them and to do them well.
Patty, before we jump to Tim, we had a question from one of our YouTube video viewers asking if there was anything on no-till farming.
So I wouldn't say there's anything specific with the words no-till, but one, I didn't list everything, I said stop talking, but USDA does also have to do some reporting on kind of what does the agriculture supply chain look like? How do we have more like alternative supply chains, not just kind of the commodity markets we have now? So I would hope folks who are doing innovative things like no-till maybe would see themselves in that report, like I need a supply chain that rewards this, this, and this. And then I would say also that report about inputs, right? Like no-till is different. You need different inputs to supply a different type of farming. So again, it's not no-till specific, but I would hope maybe some of the challenges people are dealing with, to get into that no-till system might be addressed in that report they do on inputs.
Awesome.
Okay. Well, yeah, thanks, Dina. Thanks, Patty. That was great. I took a lot of notes down here, and if y'all could see my notes, they're all over the place. So I'm going to try to bring them all together. I just want to say that this executive order is something that these issues, especially within agriculture, but generally within the idea that we need representation in our democratic process that represents people and not represents multinational billion-dollar and foreign corporations. This is in response to all that work that MRCC, our members, our allies, farmers across our state and across our country have been fighting for quite literally decades. So, it's a good sign that somebody may be listening. And I say maybe very intentionally. They're listening, but now we got to make them do it. And I think Patty spoke to that quite well about, this is just the first step, and now we got to push them, and not just us, here within MRCC, but us across the country on all of these issues. So listening is a very important part of our democratic process that I don't think happens nearly enough. And that's what we're really trying to push. In my humble opinion, one of the main purposes of government is to be a referee within the market so that there is competition, so that capitalism can truly exist. When you have 4 corporations controlling over 85% of the beef slaughter, and that's JBS, Tyson, Cargill, and National Beef, and when 2 of those corporations, JBS, a Brazilian corporation, and National Beef, which is actually the majority is owned by Marfrig, which is also a Brazilian corporation. Also ironic that our National Beef is owned by a Brazilian corporation. When you have 4 corporations, multi-billion-dollar corporations that are controlling 85% of the beef in this country, then they have an unfair advantage, obviously, to be able to price where they want to price, pay what they want to pay, and make as much money in the middle as they can. And I think beef right now at the grocery store, relative to what cattle farmers are getting paid here in Missouri and across our country, is a good example of how beef at the grocery store is sky high, record levels, cattle prices are low, and somebody and something is making that money in the middle. And this is going to address that. And another thing that Patty was speaking to was this report process, which doesn't sound, too sexy, right? But I think the purpose of it is important. We have to know where we are as a starting point in order to create good policies and rules in order to know where we need to go. So within this executive order, the Biden administration is pushing his agencies to create these reports to see where we are and then react to that, not only within his administration, but then also, and this is where we come in too, pushing our congressional representatives, both House of Reps and Senate, to do something about this. Not only just have the administration do something about it, but have policy that comes out of this executive order that does something about it. And looking forward to an upcoming farm bill that we're having in 2022, 2023. Farm bills are passed new farm bills are passed every 5 years or so. Having this be a foundation for what the policies going into the farm bill and coming out of the farm bill are. To have this executive order in a vacuum and then have the major part of farm and food policy in a vacuum doesn't make any sense. And ideally, our congressional representatives will see this as marching orders to create a farm bill that's good for family farmers and consumers, not a farm bill that is written basically by corporate agriculture, multinational corporations, traders, the ones that are bringing in, importing billions of pounds of beef into this country. And I'll just use that as an example. According to USDA, the Economic Research Service, from January 1 of this year through May 2021, we've imported 1.25 billion pounds of beef into this country. And that's boxed beef. That doesn't account for cattle on the hoof that comes across our borders. So these multinational meat packers, their ability to go around the world and buy commodities and then import them into the United States, undercut the prices paid to U.S. independent producers, charge consumers more, and make all that money in the middle is a major problem. And we need this executive order to address that. Patty said, a couple of things that are in the executive order: a rulemaking process within the Packers and Stockyards Act, which is generally the part of USDA that keeps fairness within the farm and food system, but also looks at antitrust and this uber concentration in our markets. The fact that 85% of the beef is controlled by 4 corporations, over 70% of the pork in this country is controlled by 4 corporations. 2 of those corporations are the same, JBS and Tyson. And then within hogs, the biggest player is Smithfield, which is owned by a Chinese multinational corporation, the WH Group. Seed is another issue that Patty referred to. We have 3 corporations controlling the majority of the seed in this country: Dow DuPont, Syngenta, and ChemChina, which sort of merged into Corteva, and Monsanto Bayer. And those last 2 are foreign corporations that control our seed in this country. So we really have to push this. And we have to look at, and one thing that Campaign for Family Farms and the Environment and MRCC being a member of that coalition is looking at how our taxpayer dollars are being used to not only fuel the industrialization and corporate takeover of our farm and food system, but at the expense of independent family farmers, our rural communities, our rural economies, our economy in general, all the way to our national security, and to the question of who does our democratic process truly represent? Does it represent people? Is it democracy, or does it represent corporations? And a lot of the policies we see coming out of both DC and our state house here in Missouri and state houses across our country are written for and by lobbyists and the corporations they represent. So this ideally is going to be something that is truly representative of what is happening out here. Here at MRCC, our goal is to listen first, speak second. And, I think and I hope that this is a good first step in that listening process. And then just to sort of put a bow on this, there is a sentence in the executive order that says, while at the same time providing an environment conducive to the preservation of our democratic, political, and social institutions. And I think that's a really important sentence, because the more that corporations control our food system by way of controlling our democratic process, the less of a truly representative democratic process we have. And the bigger they get and the more control they get, the less democracy we have. So I appreciate the opportunity to just actually, just touch on this executive order a little bit, because there's a lot more we can talk about, but hopefully we'll have some questions from people that'll allow us to expound on more things that this does potentially, and how we as taxpayers, farmers, consumers can play a role in making it a reality.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to kind of roll two questions into one. So I'll see. I think probably Tim, I'll have you talk on it first, but Patty, you may have a thought as well. So we've talked about corporate consolidation. We kind of like named that. We named some of the big name, like the companies that are part of that. But can we give like an explicit example of what that looks like of the owning from start to finish? And with that, Patty, when you talked about how, hopefully we want things to look different for farmers, if we like things look more fair, what does that look like? What does it mean? And I think those two can kind of go hand in hand.
I would like Patty to start that response, if you don't mind, please, because I think I'll provide a more on the ground example, and I think Patty can do a more general example.
Yeah, and we can answer this at kind of different levels. I mean, the thing that comes to mind for me from where I sit in Washington, D.C. and why can't we get, this kind of rule, or why does the industry get away with that? I mean, one of the reasons is because these big companies are very good. So, in any given sector, if we're talking about beef, it's this 4 companies. If we're talking about pork, some of them are the same, but maybe there's a couple different, but there's the big 4 over there. They control a lot of the market. That gives them a lot of economic power. And we are in a system where that economic power translates to political power. And so when we get frustrated here in Washington, or, in whichever state capital, or even your local government, about, why are factory farms invading? Why don't we have local control anymore to say they can't be cited here? Why do they not have to get permits? If they have permits, why aren't they enforced? All of these questions, we run straight into the political power of this industry, and the political power is related to how big they are. And then everything else we want to do that MRCC does with patchwork, it shouldn't be this hard to raise animals the right way, to farm the right way for your community, for your family, for the environment, for the animals. Oh, we know these are better systems, and it's really hard to make those systems, grow and flourish in a marketplace that's run by 4 companies who get away with doing unfair stuff, right? And we don't want to create, we're having this conversation now about how do we get more small meat plants in, so we have a little more slack in the system if the big guys shut down like they did last year. I don't want to create new meat plants and then make them compete on an unlevel playing field where you can't make it, and in 3 years they're going to be gone. Like, we have to deal with the behavior of these dominant companies to do anything else we want to do in agriculture from a family farm agriculture kind of way. So that's the core issue for me, is that power. There's lots of other things. We have factory farms because we have big meat plants, right? And those farms have gotten bigger, if I'm going to call them farms. Those facilities have gotten bigger, and some of them are directly controlled by big meat packers because of the size and scale of those packing plants. The system is really, really linked. So if we want to break that system up, we have to have smaller players in the middle who are going to behave better. And that's what these rules should be getting us to.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I can tell you that the corporations don't like this executive order, and they're doing everything they can do to both not talk about it in the public, not really seeing much about it in the major ag media, because the big players, the big corporate agribusinesses don't want to in any way highlight this, because they know that the vast majority of people out here agree with it. So I can give, what does consolidation look like here in Missouri? I think people see it every day. And we use this example often. It's an unfortunate example, but it's a true example. In Missouri in 1985, we had 23,000 independent hog producers, major economic drivers in our rural communities and for our rural economies, for small business on our local main streets. As of the last agriculture of census, we had just over 2,600. So that's 23,000 in the mid 80s to 2,600 now. And that's not because they just decided they wanted to stop raising hogs. It's because the corporations, the meatpacking corporations, drove the price down so low that independent producers were losing money on every hog. They were making money because they were working toward and are now vertically integrated, but they're making it in the middle, while independent producers got paid less, got put out of business. Consumers paid more, and the middlemen made more money. So the hog market is a perfect example of what corporate consolidation and vertical integration and industrialization does to on the ground to independent family farmers, and we see it within the cattle market too, and we see it within the grain market. We're seeing it within all agricultural markets. The dairy market is a horrible, unfortunate example right now of what's happening to dairy producers going out of business, especially in the northern states that produce more milk. What does this look like? What we need is diverse ownership of land out here by independent family farmers, by more family farmers raising more livestock independently, getting paid a price so that they can pass that farm on to the next generation. What we see within consolidation is that family farmers go out of business, or oftentimes the next generation doesn't come back to the farm because their parents say, there's no money in this other than a check you're getting in the mail from the government to attempt to somewhat make you whole. And then where does that land go? We're seeing Wall Street buying up land. We're seeing pension funds buying up land. We're seeing foreign corporations buying up land. And the farther that control gets away from that land, from independent family farmers and local landowners, the less they care about us, the less they care about our economy, our water and air, and our democratic process, our food system, our national security. So this is really a bigger question of diverse ownership of land out here. And here at MRCC, we know we need that, not only for all those things I talked about, but to have a democratic process that really represents people, to have healthy environments, to have healthy economies.
Bringing up the more family farmers on the land always generates this question. So I will definitely kick this to you, Tim. But what kind of impact would that have on climate change if we see this change, if these plans become real?
Well, we know that climate change is real, and it's an existential problem that we need to address as a country and as a world. We believe that family farmers are the solution, or part of the solution. The family farmers are stewards of the land. They sequester carbon into the soil. Animals on pasture sequester carbon into the soil, which is really important. And what we see at the federal level is the corporations coming up with what we call false solutions. They're corporate solutions to a corporate problem, which is taxpayers trying to foot the bill so that they can continue to pollute as they pollute, while there's offsets and farmers can sign up for it to get pennies for sequestering carbon into the soil, while the polluters still pollute and climate change still happens. We're a group, and CFFE is a coalition that is working very diligently to stop the funneling of our money, taxpayer dollars, to the polluters, to the people, to the corporations that extract all the wealth from our communities and put family farmers out of business and foul our water and air. We think, and we've actually wrote an op-ed about family farmers being one of the solutions or part of the solution to climate change. And I know Patty has probably a lot to say about that as well.
No, I think in this ties, it ties. I see somebody in the comments is saying, what do we do next? What we need is to end whatever the problem is, right? So if you're out and about, like the House is already in recess, Senate's going to go probably this weekend, you are going to see them out and about in your town because they need to get their picture taken because they didn't get their picture taken last year. So talk to them about this. And if they say, oh, I got this plan for climate, or I got this plan to fix the broken cattle markets, because everybody left, right, and center is acknowledging that our cattle markets are broken. Talk to them about this is what we need instead, right? So kind of whatever the problem is, making a level playing field for family farms doing it the right way is the answer. It's good for the climate. It's good for our rural economies. It's good for a bunch of things. And so the first thing I think people can do is say, I was happy to see that executive order, because a lot of folks, I think, in Congress and other places are a little bit nervous This is big. It's like a big thing they put out there. And we first, at this stage, need to say that was right, that you made a big plan. Now you have to execute the plan. And then I think whichever is the most compelling to you, country of origin labeling, this stuff about how meat packers write contracts through these packers and stockyards rules. Pick a thing if you're so motivated and say, hey, congressman or senator, I'm holding you accountable that USDA gets that done. You have oversight over them. And I know MRCC has ideas coming up about how to do that as a group, but that's what's in my head right now because I am desperate for the Senate to leave because they're driving me crazy. They are coming your way. They're going to be out and about. So talk to them and say, I was happy to see this executive order. It is about time that the federal government takes on competition and brings it back and let them hear that real people outside the Beltway want this done.
And I know, thank you, Patty. And that's very true. The vast majority of real people out here know that there's something wrong. They know that corporate control is a problem, and they know we got to do something about it. The one thing that MRCC is doing is that we're really working to get this executive order and these issues that we're talking about, extreme concentration and corporate control and foreign corporate control over our farm and food system in the media. So one thing that we're doing is we're going to hold a letter to the editor writing training. And that's going to be, and I know Dina's going to, I believe, put a link into chat, which is a sign up. It's going to be on Zoom. It's going to be next Thursday, a week from tomorrow, August 12th at 2 p.m. And I think Brian in our office is going to be leading that training. But exactly what Patty just talked about, how can we personalize this so that it's not just this big executive order that came out of the Biden administration, but instead we sort of bring it down to relate to what's going on out here. And what's going on out here is diverse to each different person and each different family. But I think in general, stepping back and looking at what's happening to our communities and our neighbors, it's affecting all of us, and it's affecting all of us pretty majorly. And here at MRCC, we're pretty pissed about what's going on out here, and we really know that this may be a big step, this executive order, but we need big steps right now because, the lobbyists and the corporate narrative are saying that the system is working exactly like it's supposed to work. And let me tell you, according to what they're doing, it's working exactly like they've set up. But that's not how capitalism is supposed to work. We can't have monopolistic control within capitalism. It ceases to exist after that. And it kills everything that we value from, our economies, our water and air, ingenuity, upcoming small businesses and entrepreneurs, everything that we value, corporate control and multinational monopolistic corporate control totally quells it, and that's not good, and that's not cool. It's not the American dream. It's not what we think we should have the ability to do.
Thank you so much, guys. Yeah, I want to just reiterate, because folks are excited about this taking action, that exactly as Patty said, if you see folks or you want to write them emails, that personalized touch with your story, really lifting up why that issue matters to you, makes it stand out. And as Tim said, for our training next week, we'll really walk through how to write a really compelling letter to the editor. So if you've never written one, we're setting that up for you to really jump in and start taking action on that. And we're very excited to have Emily Yonkers from the Joplin Globe will be joining us to help talk about what they look for and what gets your letter, bumped up in more attention, what maybe you want to avoid. So we'll have some insider tips on that too. We're very excited about that. So we will make sure that Zoom link is in the comments so you can RSVP for that. But yeah, just everybody tuning in, paying attention, and then talking about it, in your communities, to your representatives. But we want to make sure we're lifting this up so that they're clear, as Patty said, that we're excited about this and that we're planning to hold them accountable to move it forward.
And if anybody ever needs to, if they want to talk directly to me, if Jamie, if you don't mind putting my email and our office telephone number up too, feel free to get a hold of me. If the LTE thing isn't your jam, but you feel like there's other actions you can take, or if you want to know other actions you can take and we can brainstorm about it, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. That's what we're here for. That's what we do. And I would actually appreciate it very much.
Absolutely. And as Jamie puts on the screen, because I forget to say sometimes, you can always follow us on social media to kind of stay up on what's changing, these issues, and then sign up to get involved if you want to get our action alerts and emails. We would love to have you. But thank you so much, Patty and Tim, for joining us today and walking us through what is a dense topic, but really important. We really appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in.
Yeah, thanks all very much. Let us know what you need.